everybody into the 2021 Grind City Media Draft Preview Show. We are here to get you prime, prepped, and ready for Thursday's draft as it pertains to the Memphis Grizzlies and the rest of the NBA. I'm Jessica Benson, and we are joined by an all-star GCM crew, starting with Kelcey Wright Johnson. Kelcey, how's it going?
An all-star line. I like it. I'm ready to talk draft stuff for you guys.
You have been putting in a ton of work
with
GCM's
mock draft.
It has been
4 weeks, Jess. 4 weeks, and I'm finally on the platform, ready to talk. Let's go.
All right, the research is done. The time is now, and we are also joined by Mike Wallace, who is always working, one of the busiest members of GCM. Mike, how's it going?
Hey, it's going great. We're here now. It's one of those situations where, look, all the work, there's a lot of activity going on. We didn't have to wait to draft night to get started with it, so I'm excited about what's going to happen.
Way to tease it a little bit there as everyone at this point knows. We are also joined via Skype by Pete Pranica, the television voice of the Memphis Grizzlies. Pete, it is great to see you again.
Oh, it's great to be back with you all. I really enjoyed my time on Rise and Grind, but this promises to be a very intriguing NBA draft. There have been some moves made or reported to be made already, and I think there are going to be other dominoes, and Bradley Beal and Damian Lillard and some other big names could be changing addresses in addition to the draft on Thursday night.
Absolutely. And when it comes to the Grizzlies, you have a team that is coming off a season where they, by all means, exceeded expectations, won their way through the Western Conference play-in tournament, ultimately fell to the Utah Jazz in the first round. But as Mike mentioned, a little activity to start draft week, and it had Memphis in its clutches at this point as we just kick off draft week with the news that reportedly Memphis is sending Jonas Valanciunas along with picks 17 and 51 to New Orleans in exchange for Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe, picks 10 and 40 in this year's draft, plus a 2022 first-round pick via the Lakers. Mike, I'll start with you. When the Woj bomb drops on Monday, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were, this is typical of this new front office. I mean, they've made moves each of the last 2 years that they've been in full control of the draft, with Zach Kleiman, obviously Tayshaun Prince, Rich Tro, and those guys in the front office. They've been active, they've been aggressive, they've been opportunistic. So it didn't surprise me that reportedly they were going to get some things done. And, there's still a lot of things that have to play out. There's some moving parts going on right now. But based on what's been reported publicly, the Grizzlies are in a really, really good position, both now and potentially well into the future with that draft pick status that they have moving forward.
I know if this is indeed the case, no one will miss more than you the opportunity to say Jonas Valanciunas rolls out of bed and gets a double-double.
He's still in the division. Reportedly, he's reportedly going to still be in the division. As the schedule works out, you still see the New Orleans Pelicans 4 times. So hopefully he gets those double-doubles, but just not against the Grizzlies if this thing goes down as reported.
Right, I was going to say, hopefully if that is the case, you're not the one talking about Jonas Valanciunas rolling out of bed and getting a double-double. I will personally miss the denim jean jacket with the wolf on the back, custom styles by JV. Also, that turtleneck game was incredibly strong. But Kelcey, I'll ask you, when you see this come through, what indication does it give you of what this front office may be doing in terms of heading into the draft?
I mean, first off, I was so sad just to see the report because I have been with Jonas Valanciunas every single year of my entire career.
The Canadian pull.
We moved over here to Memphis together, so we'll see. What was your initial question? What do I think?
She's still shocked.
I'm just like,
she's still sad.
Like,
but it's so real because that really is the first thing that hits is you do develop relationships with players in a market, and Jonas Valanciunas, by all means, has been an incredibly charismatic member of this team. He's someone who makes you laugh. He's someone who kind of lightens up a media room. So it is tough to see him go if that is the case.
It is, but 2 players reportedly coming to the Grizzlies, 1 probably not, also reported. But I think this is just the first move out of a couple that the Grizzlies, if they do make, are going to make. So I think there's still a lot up in the air of what happens. I'm a big fan of Steven Adams. I'm fine to see Bledsoe continue on, so we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, and Pete, as Kelcey said, various reports indicate that this might not be the end of the Grizzlies front office making moves. We have seen this front office establish themselves as an aggressive front office at this point. When you see something like this come across your timeline yesterday or on Monday per se, what do you think about what the Grizzlies may be trying to achieve moving forward?
Well, like everybody else, I'm really going to miss Jonas, and I'm going to be saying Jaeger.
Yes.
And you're right, Jesse. He was fantastic in the locker room, fantastic in the media room, and we are really going to miss him on a personal and a professional level. what this says to me is that Zach Kleiman and this front office, they have a vision for how to build this team. And how to build this team is primarily through drafting and developing the young talent that you have. And they have had a strong track record of drafting good players, high character players, guys who maybe aren't necessarily one and dones, and then developing them. And you've seen it with Brandon Clark, and you've seen it with Desmond Bane, and you've seen it with Dylan Brooks. And I think they're trying to get a little higher in the draft if all this, as reported, comes to be. This is a draft that's very heavy in wings, a lot of 3-and-D wings, and guys who have the ability to make the three. Those are things that the Grizzlies certainly can use, because the NBA right now, it's all about length and switchability, and that coveted Swiss Army knife type player. That is what I think the Grizzlies are going to continue to look for. And I think when I see this type of move and the opportunity to move up in the draft, I mean, that's been a Zach Kleiman hallmark every year he's been here. Let's get higher in the draft and find somebody that we really like.
And this 2021 draft has certainly been a draft that's been highlighted for some time, specifically with those top 5 guys, or maybe you view it as a 4+1 with Jonathan Kuminga just outside the likes of Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, Jalen Green, and Jalen Suggs. But Kelcey, I know you've put in the work on our Grind City Media mock draft, and there's certainly more depth to choose from at 10 versus 17 if that is where the Grizzlies pick. Who are some names that have been circulating around that area?
I think this is a really, really deep draft, and we're looking at the mock draft right now, which has happened over the last 4 weeks, and the pre-draft workouts have changed a lot of that order. I think Moses Moody would be a really good fit for literally any team. He's like the draft's premier 3-and-D guy, like Pete just said. He's got this NBA-ready skill set. I don't think anyone is going to say no to someone who can come in right away and contribute on both ends. I really like him. I like Goody. I mean, he was the 16th pick in this mock draft. I do not think he's going to last until 16. Like, not a chance, especially after a lot of his pre-draft workouts. And I think Evan Mobley's going to move up too, but that's a little too rich for our blood, unfortunately.
Just a little bit. That USC caliber player, the first Pac-12 player in history to get Defensive Player of the Year, Freshman of the Year, and Player of the Year. But who's keeping track on Evan Mobley? Mike, when you look at those names that are up there, more outside of specific names, what kind of player should the Grizzlies be looking at when it comes to how they continue to try to build out this team?
Well, if they're going to continue to build out based on the benchmarks that they have in place right now, you have a transcendent point guard in Ja Morant. You have a versatile big, new age big in Jaren Jackson Jr. You need a guy that's fitting between those guys, alongside Dylan, eventually maybe to play with Dylan or behind Dylan, or be in that 3-4 tweener, or maybe 2-3. So a lot of those guys on that board have the same skill set when it comes to that. You can plug them into those spots. But I do think if the Grizzlies are going to build young, you want to have someone that's in that sort of experience range, but also young enough to continue to grow alongside the 21, 22-year-olds we have as franchise pillars. So, I like a couple names in there. I like Josh, the Australian, Giddey. I like Kuminga, right? And I also like, it's one of those situations where, Moody he seems to be the wild card that everyone wants to attach their name to, depending on where they fall. And the Grizzlies have connections, ironically, to all 3 of those guys in terms of how they've been able to view them and scout them and see them develop over the last couple of years.
Throughout the show, we'll be throwing it back to the last 2 drafts for the Grizzlies, and obviously everything circles back to 2019 when the Grizzlies were gifted with the lottery choice of the 2nd pick in the draft and ultimately were able to get Ja Morant. Pete, when you look at how the Grizzlies are trying to build around Ja, he had his Rookie of the Year first season. He had a build off of that in year 2. Now going into year 3, it's more than clear that the 2nd pick in the lottery was a franchise changer for Memphis. How important is he as the centerpiece for this Grizzlies team as they try to figure out what it is they are going to be down the road?
Well, what's important for the Grizzlies is we know what Ja can do, and we know that there's going to be an improvement in his outside shot. So now how can this franchise maximize his gifts? And part of that is, can you get a guy like a Kyle Anderson who can handle the ball so that Ja does not have to play on the ball all the time. And that's why if you can get someone who is versatile and who can be kind of a distributor and a shot maker and a bucket getter, that will allow Ja to be a little bit more creative so that he is not having to bring the ball up all the time and initiate the offense. I think that's the type of player that is going to allow Ja to fully express his offensive ability that would be the type of player, if I'm the general manager, that's the type of player that I'm going to be looking for. And ideally, you'd like somebody who is a little bit a plug and play, and that's why Duarte out of Oregon. He's 24 years old. If there's a plug and play guy in the draft, he would be somebody that certainly that you could work with. Now, Giddey, of course, is a point guard. He's very young, so now there you're talking about upside. So if you can continue to surround Ja with talent as a distributor, shot maker, and again, like I said, allow him to play periodically off the ball, I think that's where you're headed.
Well, and you saw that clip, too, of the call Ja moment, and you're going to have players ultimately wanting to play with a player like Ja Morant. As we move into year 3 of his very young career, he has already established himself as one of the rising stars in this association. Mike, I'll ask you, going back to that 2019 draft, Pete mentioned the word aggressive earlier. That's when we really got our first little taste of Zach Kleiman running a more aggressive front office as they traded up to take Brandon Clark in that draft. What did that pick teach you, perhaps, about how this front office operates?
That these guys know what they're doing. And I was in the draft room. I was in the secluded room with Zach when the number 2 pick came up, and it was the Grizzlies, right? And Zach was so nervous and so excited about where the Grizzlies landed that he forgot some of his things at the table. And I grabbed the pen that he wrote down the lottery numbers with, and he was lucky to get that back, and he sort of cherishes that as well. But so we knew the luck came in the number 2. But the strategy came with moving up to get, Brandon Clark. And they were aggressive. They found a fit. They found a guy that they liked. He's an older sort of veteran type player when you talk about what he was able to do in college. And that pick made sense for the Grizzlies at that time. Now you have to understand, okay, what does this mean moving forward with this particular player and this particular roster at this point? So who you get, I think they have some depth between Xavier Tillman, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr. at that 4/5 tweener. They have to go in sort of the 2 or 3 area. But I think that Brandon Clark pick showed that this front office was connected. They identified the kind of guy they wanted. They looked past some of the so-called warts, the short arms and stayed in college a little bit longer. And they said, this is a guy that'll fit. And what did Brandon Clark come and do? First team all rookie, right? So it worked out.
Absolutely. So far, we've hit a lot on this draft preview show. We have more still to come. We'll take a little bit more of a look at some of the other picks around the NBA. Plus, we'll throw it back to the 2020 draft for the Memphis Grizzlies. We'll be back with more here on Grind City Media. The sun is out. That's a new development since the last time we sat here, and it is so hot.
It is brutal. But I'm born and raised here, and every summer it hits you like a ton of bricks, and you're just thinking to yourself, you would think I'd be used to it by now. And every summer I think to myself, why do I not have braids right now? Like, why do I do this to myself every summer?
Rise and Grind with Jessica and Megan. Live daily at 8 a.m. on grindcitymedia.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Grind City Media Draft Preview Show. We will pop up that Grind City Media mock draft that Kelcey Wright Johnson has been working on for the past couple of weeks. And taking a look at it, Kelcey, it's similar, at least in that top spot, to where the expectation is that the Detroit Pistons will ultimately take Cade Cunningham out of Oklahoma State with the first overall pick. I know there have been conversations about the Pistons at least getting their eyes on a couple of other guys, but ultimately, we think Cade Cunningham will be a Detroit Piston. What do you make of that selection for Detroit? A first overall pick can honestly change a franchise.
It absolutely can, and that was the first interview we did. Obviously, we did this in order, and it was no question. I think Cade worked out with Detroit and was like, yeah, I'm good here. Like, it was just kind of, I feel like everyone knows that, but then as soon as you go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's even gone down to 7, 8, I feel like it's all up in the air, which is the most exciting thing. And a lot of the time, I did draft coverage last year as well. Mike, you've done it for years. Like, teams, when it's that high, have that opportunity. Like you said, a Ja Morant, a second, you go with the best talent. I feel like this one, everyone is so talented down until 10, where reportedly maybe the Grizzlies may be able to get someone who could be league ready right now.
Yeah, I think that's why it adds a little extra spiciness to get the Grizzlies into that territory, because those names do continue to trickle down further and further throughout the lottery. And Mike, for you, when you look at those top 5 picks specifically, because when we did come into this, it felt very much like, all right, the top 4, we know the guys, we're not sure exactly where they will go, where it will shake out. In any other year, and Evan Mobley might be a number 1 pick in the draft. But for those franchises, who intrigues you the most in that this pick could ultimately change the trajectory for their franchise very much quicker than later?
You know, I look at a team like Orlando, right, and Golden State. Those are 2 teams that are going into this draft with diametrically opposed visions right now. One is going super young and building for 20 years out. The other one has to do something right now. But both teams have lottery capital when you talk about multiple picks in the first 13 or 14. So when you look at how they're going to position themselves, and are they going to be willing to be trade partners for guys to move up even higher, or completely move out, and as Pete alluded to in his opening part, position themselves to make some big time splashes with some of the proposed guys that are going to be working their way out. You know, the Damian Lillards, those kind of guys, the Bradley Bills. So when you look at, okay, who can the team like Orlando Magic look at and say, this is a guy we need to build around, bring in with some of our young talent and see where they go? They got 2 high picks, and I don't think that they can miss. Having said that, don't be the Los Angeles Clippers, who had 2 lottery picks a couple years ago and ended up passing twice on a guy that could have been a transcendent player when you talk about what that team was able to do. They missed, or I think they were at 8 and 9 or 9 and 10 at that point. And it was one of those situations where they didn't come away with anyone that you're looking at in their lineup right now.
Pete, I'll ask you the same question. And from here in Memphis perspective, when you get that number 2 pick in John Morant, and it very much changes where the franchise goes moving forward, and you're building around John, what he can do for this team, what team do you see as the one to look out for following this draft that will kind of intrigue you the most?
Well, I go along with Mike and with Golden State as well, because Golden State now is in a situation where they want to win now. I mean, Steph Curry is getting on in years. Draymond Green, that group has been around. You're going to get Klay Thompson back. So the expectation in Oakland is we need somebody that can help us right now, whether they do that via trade or whether they do that via the draft. Orlando's going to take a much longer view of this. Because they really decided to tear it apart last year and go back to the beginning and start over. So, but Golden State's very intriguing, because Golden State's really smarting from the fact that they were in the play-in tournament and could not get through it to the playoffs. And there's great expectations for them. They've got a building that they want to fill, and they expect to have Klay Thompson back. So whatever Golden State does is going to bear an awful lot of watching, because they do want to put themselves back in the championship conversation ASAP.
And you certainly want Steph Curry to have the opportunity to live out his best years with the surrounding characters that have a situation where they're moving out of the play-in tournament or not having to deal with the play-in tournament in the very near future. Let's bring it back to the Grizzlies and throw it back to the 2020 draft, which is hard to believe was just a year ago. And despite not having any high picks in that draft, they found great value and once again showed that they were willing to trade up for guys that they had evaluated as being new key components to this team. Kelcey, they get Desmond Bane at 30, and he goes on to be named to the all-rookie second team. When you look back 1 year later, how do you evaluate this pick from the Grizz?
I think everyone, the Grizzlies have done such a good job, and I think last year we were like, oh, we have 30, 35, great, we're not going to get much, but they've done such a great job, the front office here, in finding the right guys. And it's not to say that Desmond Bane or Xavier Tillman wouldn't be who they are on other teams, but they fit so well with the culture here, with the youth. Even you can see Desmond was the shooter that I think this team needed at the time. And again, a 4-year guy. He comes with a little more experience. He averaged, 16 and a half points per game at TCU. Like, he was a good player, and they were able to see that even coming from a small team. That was my favorite play right there that we watched the entire season of Desmond. And then Xavier, 3 years with Michigan. These were older guys, but still young enough to come in with those star eyes in the NBA. They came in with experience from college, and then both of them started games this year. And I think that's really important to note that they have that experience now coming back into their second years.
Yeah, Mike, you dubbed Desmond Bane and Xavier Tillman as first-year vets. And they were 2 players that, due to all of the different unforeseen circumstances that the Grizzlies went through last season, had to step up into more primary roles in different parts of the season than perhaps was originally expected when they were picked. hit 30 and 35. Moving forward, I guess how much inspiration, for lack of a better word, does it give a front office when you can hit that late in the draft on guys of that caliber?
It just builds trust, right? It builds trust in the system. It builds trust in the scouting department, where guys are spending countless days and weeks and months on the road, pouring through all the film and all of these things coming during the midst of a pandemic. So to be able to hit on guys amid all of these challenges from a scouting situation, just underscores how connected this front office is. I mean, these guys, again, we look at their roster, right? But, the front office, Zach Kleiman, Tayshaun Prince, these guys are young guys too, right? So that youthful energy, that chip on the shoulder, let's prove some things, you're seeing that play out there too. Taylor Jenkins, one of the youngest coaches. So you have this youthful enthusiasm that goes into this process, and the energy is there for those guys to do what they need to do.
And Jess, I just want to say one more thing. We go back even a couple more years. One of our starters, our best defender on the team, he was 45th.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like the Grizzlies have this track record of getting late, even into the second round, and still finding these guys that are fitting really well into what the Grizzlies are doing. And
that was they identified Dylan at that point, and they chased it. They wanted to make sure that he was going to be available then, and it wasn't a consensus among that previous staff that Dylan was going to be an NBA ready player. But I think Dylan stepped in and proved everyone, a lot of people wrong in that situation, and the Grizzlies hit on that. If you redraft that one, Dylan's clearly a first-round pick. Mm-hmm. If you redraft the 2020 draft, Desmond Bane is a lottery pick. And that tells you right now what the Grizzlies are doing. They're bringing in guys who can elevate their game, take coaching, develop, and they perform when they get their opportunities.
We will see what direction this front office goes with the draft on Thursday. I will end this by asking each of you, and we'll start with you, Pete. When you look at this Grizzlies team, and we're talking about a team that made it to the playoffs. This time last year, I'm not sure we expected to be having that kind of conversation this year, but we have a Grizzlies team. They bow out in the first round to the Utah Jazz. What is the missing link, the next component that takes the team to the next step that they need to identify either in the draft or in this offseason?
Well, I'm going to go back to the 3-and-D, which this is a perfect draft for a 3-and-D player in order, or for a franchise to get one. 3-point shooting, you can never have enough shooting. You have to average 10, 11, 12 threes a game. And I know that there were games where the Grizzlies had single-digit threes and still won, but that's a hard way to go. Dylan Brooks is an elite defender. Can you add another elite perimeter defender and a guy who can hit 3-point shots on a consistent basis? Not that he has to be simply a 3-point shooter. And to go back to what this front office is doing very quickly, Zach Kleiman, and I talked to him about Desmond Bane, he said, we're not looking for a 3-point shooter. We're not looking for a defender. We are looking for basketball players. Can they do a little bit of everything? Will they accept coaching? Are they high character guys? And part of the success of this front office in identifying players late in the draft, whether it's late first or in the second round, they know what type of player they want. They know what type of personality they want. They know what type of skill set they want. And staying true to that identity has allowed them, I think, to better identify people like Dylan Brooks or Desmond Bane.
That's like a small 8-piece puzzle, Pete, but I'll let it fly because you hit a lot of really important points in it. Kelcey, I'll ask you.
I'm going to go off what Pete said. I think a 3-and-D guy. I think a guy who can, like a Davion Mitchell, if he falls to whatever number the Grizzlies get at, he's an incredible defender. He's, again, like we talked about, he's one of those older guys from college coming in. I also think Moses Moody would be an absolute perfect fit. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, just like the perfect 3-and-D guy, the best probably there is in the draft. And then Josh Giddey could go with what you said earlier, kind of get Ja some opportunities to play off the ball a little bit. He's probably the best passer, and he's like this big 6'7", could play the 1 or the 2. And so he's got size, he's got vision, he's got IQ.
Yes.
So I like all three of those guys. If I had to pick one, if you were going to nail it down, I would say Moses Moody would be probably the best fit, just because he's so safe. Like, he could be a contributor on any team. He's a great catch and shoot guy, and just he's going to be a rotation caliber player on any team he goes to.
Yeah, there are certainly a lot of options, and it's draft season, it's draft week when you hear the Grizzlies linked to so many different players. That is very on brand for draft week, and that's what makes it so fun to see how it ultimately plays out on Thursday. But Mike, I'll end with you. What's the biggest thing the Grizzlies need to be looking for?
Well, I'll tell you what, first I want to point out, you said that this time a year ago we wouldn't have envisioned this, right? This team making the playoffs. This time a year ago they were actually in the play-in, right? Getting to the play-in at this point. So it's almost like that reminds you how crazy this past year was when it comes to that. But you know, at the end of the day, man, this is a team that took a step forward. Now, how can they continue to take steps forward? I still think they have work to do. I still think they're going to do some more work to get this done. It's not over with this draft and setting up for the draft. And I also think I'm not going to rule out that they won't bring in some kind of playoff-ready type player, some kind of way, whether it's in a follow-up trade or whatever, to try to keep this team and this young group trajectory going in the right direction. But if you ask me on this draft, you know, I like Josh Giddey. I just do. I just think he brings you that Luka factor that a lot of teams kind of, you know, want now. A foreign player, can pass the ball, has some size on the wing, can play with Ja, can replace Ja, and it just gives you a dynamic guy out there with some size. I just, if you're going to jump up and try to strike for gold, he reminds me of a guy that you can strike for gold for. And they do have connections to that Australian basketball league within the front office, so keep an eye on that too. That could be an option.
We will see who the Grizzlies are ultimately welcoming to Memphis a little bit later this week. Thank you, Kelcey, Mike, and Pete. I so appreciate y'all's help on this panel as we try to preview the draft and figure out what exactly will go down. We will continue to have all the coverage for the 2021 NBA draft on Grind City Media. Kelcey and I will actually be hosting a little Instagram Live the half hour leading up to the draft, so be sure to check that out on the official Grizzlies Instagram account. But for myself, Jessica, and all the rest of my team here, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you later this week.